think I've calmed down enough. Full time, Newcastle 1, Arsenal 0. We didn't deserve to win that game, and I'll get onto that later, but we didn't deserve to lose. And, tough game, as always. One of the hardest places to go in the Premier League. Newcastle entering the match were the third best defensive team in the league behind Manchester City and ourselves. There was a bit of a gap between us and City and Newcastle, but they're still third best in the league defensively. So it was always going to be a battle. It was always going to be physical and dynamic, and they have a crowd that will always get behind them. And then the referees decided that Newcastle needed a little bit of help on the day, or maybe they decided that they didn't need to do their jobs. I don't know. I don't really know anymore. I'll save that for when we get to them. Let's tackle the winners first, because I do think there are some people who come away from this performance looking great. And there were several good performances there. I don't really think there was a particularly bad performance. But winner number one is Kai Havertz. And I think a lot of people will disagree with that, but frankly, I don't really care. It appears to me that there is a segment of the fan base that has decided that everything Kai Havertz does is going to be bad, which is fine. That's their prerogative, but we have him now, and so we're going to have to try to make the most of what he can do. And he played at the right 8 position today, although I do think at times, because Rice was playing the left 8 position, he kind of dropped in next to Jorginho, and it allowed Havertz to function more centrally as a little bit more of a 10. And I think he was great today. I really do. Again, no goals, no assists, but you can say the same thing for everybody on the team today. But the attack progressed really well through him. And he would get the ball and turn and run. He had several really good carries through the midfield where he would then try to lay it off, for Saka or Martinelli or Nketiah. And he did admittedly have a couple disappointing pass attempts in the final third, but I think he was in situations where he was trying to do those little flicks around the corners, that one-touch passing in tight spaces, so you can forgive him messing up a couple of those. But yeah, I think just something clicked for him today, especially on that right side. He was combining really well with Saka and Ben White, and even on the left, I think Martinelli is starting to trust him a little bit more, and Havertz would make those runs into the penalty box, and Martinelli would slip him in for Havertz to play, I think, a couple dangerous balls across the box. Again, this isn't anything glamorous, but I think on the day, he definitely was one of our better players on the pitch, and he also just played with this intensity that we have not seen in the last I guess since he came to Arsenal, really. And I think it was someone on the Arsenal Vision podcast who said that Havertz plays better the better team we come up against. And I think there is something to that. I think going away to Newcastle, Havertz just really was feeling himself on the day, and he was putting himself about. And of course, there's that one challenge where I do think he was a little lucky to stay on the pitch. I only say that because he's in an Arsenal shirt now. I couldn't help but think to myself, if Granit Xhaka had committed that challenge, what would have happened? A big part of this game is perception. And I feel like with Havertz, he's been largely perceived as a very ineffective player who is very meek and shy and tentative and frankly traumatized from his time at Chelsea. So today I think was really good for his perception among the fan base, because again, he played with a lot of drive, a lot of tempo, a fair amount of aggression. And even though that tackle may have riled up the Newcastle crowd a little bit, even though he was, I think, a little lucky to stay on the field, just that grit that he showed, and the ensuing tackles that he put in, and the way that Joe Linton especially was trying to do this lame tough guy routine on him, and Havertz was laughing him off. He went up a couple notches in my book on the day, and I think that kind of thing matters. I think that fearlessness is important. A lot of people will underrate it, but I think the fact that we have a guy who can be in that situation and be pretty unfazed is very valuable. We're talking about a guy who scored a Champions League winning goal. We're talking about a guy who's played in some very, very big games in his career, and he's only 24. That, I think, at the end of the day, was probably a discerning factor for why we signed him. Because this guy has been there and done that, and he's still got plenty of years left in his legs. So, yeah, I think his perception among the fan base is going to go up a little bit. Is going to improve. Again, I'm not sitting here and saying that his price tag or the wages that we're paying him have suddenly been justified, but it was just a little bit of encouragement today that I think buys him some time with the majority of the fan base. And then the second winner, I think, is Martin Odegaard, because for all of the good things that Havertz did on the day, I think we very clearly missed Odegaard in midfield. Nothing felt really incisive. I think Havertz is doing a good job of kind of, laying off the ball and playing like the simple passes. He did have one nice through ball to Nketiah. It was just, Nketiah couldn't get there in time, but I think we also needed someone who's a little bit more of a pocket passer, someone who can get the ball in those little spaces just outside the penalty box and, play more clever passes and just create a little bit more danger, a little bit more incisiveness. So, there's a few people who are talking about Odegaard losing a spot. I think today kind of showed that we still need him. I think today actually showed that we need another player like Odegaard, if anything. I think we need another two-way playmaker who can cut defenses open on a whim. Because I think we're really having trouble breaking down defenses. More on that later. So, yeah, I think, for all of the disappointing performances that Odegaard has put in today, I just think we needed someone who could control the game a little bit, maybe just take control of the tempo, slow things down, again, slice open defenses, and just be a little bit more of a classic playmaker, and that's Odegaard. So when he comes back, which hopefully is soon, I think we're going to play a little bit better, and we need him to come back. And then winner number 3 is Mikel Arteta, although I will say he is culpable in one of the losers that I'm going to discuss later on. But Arteta, for obvious reasons, decided to, after the match, get in front of the cameras and just relentlessly talk about how much of a disgrace, how embarrassing, how much of an embarrassment the refereeing was today and has been, frankly. And, again, he over and over and over. There's 3 different interviews by my count where he was really using those buzzwords of embarrassing and disgraceful and, not the standard. And he's right. And, for a while now, I've really been over this approach that Arsenal have had of trying to be buddy-buddy with the PGMOL. I never thought that was going to work. We're talking about a bunch of bullies, frankly. We're talking about the footballing equivalent of a police union, where if you don't put them under pressure, they're just going to keep on, keeping themselves out of trouble, avoiding accountability, and they're going to take advantage of you if you're, just trying to grease their palms and be nice to them. So for Arteta to cut that out today and just go at their throats, say what needed to be said, no more Mr. Nice Guy kind of thing. I'm proud of him that he did that, and I'm really glad that he did that. And it's I think it's about time that this club stopped laying down for the PGMOL. And I think the next step here is to come up with a coordinated effort between clubs, because if you have Arteta and Guardiola and Klopp and Pochettino and the other managers on a consistent basis getting in front of the microphone, getting in front of the cameras and saying these referees are not good enough. You cannot call this the best league in the world without changing these referees. I think that eventually will create enough pressure that the FA and the PGM will have to do something. Because these guys are your moneymakers. And if your biggest moneymakers, right, your managers, and I think players will, eventually start doing this as well. If you have the biggest players and biggest managers in your league talking about how your league is officiated, I think, money talks, which is what I'm trying to say here. So, again, I just think I'm really glad that Arteta just decided to be upfront and stop with the politicking, because again, that's not going to get us what we need, and what we need is more consistent refereeing and better refereeing. So those are the three winners. The three losers from today are actually what I really want to talk about, to be honest. And we'll get the big one out of the way first, which is the PGMOL. Again. And I'm getting sick and tired of this. I really am. I want to talk about the game. I want to talk about player performances. I want to talk about tactics. And these mouth breathers, these horrific excuses for professional referees keep on a weekly basis making the most asinine mistakes imaginable. These guys have instant replay. They have technology designed to keep them from making these abysmal decisions, and yet they find a way. There are two things that always find a way: life and awful decision making from the PGMOL. And the Newcastle goal, right? The ball went out of the ball looked like it went out of play. I think it's probably best if I concede that there's a chance that because of the curvature of the ball and maybe we were looking at it from the wrong perspective, there's a chance that the ball was still in. I'll concede that. But then Joel Linton is pushing through the back of Gabriel to win that header. That's a foul. He handled the ball. Handball, right? So now we're at two reasons why this goal does not stand. And then, because David Raya is ahead of Gabriel and Gabriel is the last man, the offside line is actually determined by David Raya's position. And Raya makes it so that Anthony Gordon is offside, right? So that's three reasons why this goal should not have stood. And these troglodytes looked at this in slow motion for what must have been 10 minutes and couldn't see the foul, couldn't see the handball. And then apparently reports are coming out that they did not have the angle to determine the offside. We had the angle. We're looking at it, for the whole time that they were reviewing. I don't know where this is coming from, that they don't have the angle to look at it. And now, apparently I've seen a couple of the quotes, right? Because the audio from the VAR review leaked. And it's so concerning. We are talking about what's supposed to be the best league in the world. And there seemingly is no protocol for how these guys conduct VAR reviews. They're just chatting to each other and just giving their own personal opinions. There is no rule book that they follow. There are no best practices. There are no standards, but that they must adhere to. It's just a bunch of guys from the Manchester, Midlands, upper UK area who are chatting with each other as if they're at the goddamn pub, right? Being like, oh, well, he doesn't use his arm like a weapon. That's not the standard. That's not the standard of the rule. The standard of the rule of violent conduct is if they use their hand or forearm in a violent manner or in a way that is intended to cause harm to another player. That is the standard. I don't know what you mean by he didn't use his arm as a weapon. Do you need cybernetics to get a red card in this sport now? Do you need a machine gun attached to your arm like your goddamn cyborg from Justice League? It's pathetic. It's beyond inexcusable. And I don't understand for the life of me how this is allowed to stand. I understand that refereeing is a hard job. I really do. You have to make a bunch of split-second calls in real time, and you have to, review footage within a couple minutes with the whole world yelling at you, knowing that one way or another, what you decide is going to piss people off. I don't care. You do your job right. You know why I don't care? Because I don't care that way about the players. I don't care that way about the managers. I don't care that way about the people who run the clubs. If a manager loses, 4 or 5 games in a title run, they're not doing their job, right? Especially in this day and age. If a striker does not put the ball in the back of the net on a consistent basis, they are not doing their job. If a midfielder either does not create enough chances or does not provide enough cover for the defense or does not help progress the ball through the middle and final thirds, then they are not doing their job. If a defender or a goalkeeper is struggling to keep clean sheets, then they are not doing their job. And guess what happens in all those situations? Those people get fired or transferred away and gotten rid of, and then they go and get someone to replace them. And I don't understand why a bunch of milquetoast, unremarkable white men are allowed to get away with such mediocrity. It's baffling. It's baffling. And I don't care. There's always a few people on Twitter who, try to be sympathetic and be like, oh, well, you shouldn't advocate for people to lose their jobs. No, I want them to lose their jobs. I want them to be unemployed tomorrow. Because those are the standards. This is supposed to be the best league in the world, right? And the best league in the world has the most pressure in the world. It makes the most money in the world. It has the finest margins in the world. So, if a bunch of pub mates from Manchester aren't cutting it, too damn bad. Open it up to the rest of the world. Go get referees from Canada or Japan or Brazil or Antarctica, for all I care. But go get referees who are the best at what they do, so we don't have to keep having this conversation every goddamn couple of weeks. I am sick and tired of it. Loser number 2 is David Raya. And he was having a decent game up until the Newcastle goal. And then he decided to flap at a cross when he already had a defender with him who was overmatched by the 2 attackers, right? It's just bad decision making. And, we've seen this over and over this season where he just seems to lose his composure in key moments. And I know Arteta likes him a lot. And I know Arteta values him in our build-up play more than he does Ramsdale. But at a certain point, if you're going to be ruthless, then you have to continue being ruthless. And Raya has made just a lot of inexcusable mistakes. I'm talking about what needs to be done if referees aren't doing their jobs. I don't think Raya is doing his job. And I know I just said the Newcastle goal shouldn't have stood, and I still maintain that take. But considering it did stand, right? And even if it didn't, just for the purposes of getting better moving forward. RIYA cannot come out like that for the ball and then miss it and then leave Gabriel 1v2 for Newcastle to score a winning goal. Aside from that, I know people will say that he looked nervous. I just think that's a perception thing at this point. But yeah, I think we're hitting the point where it's pretty 50-50 between RIYA and Ramsdale in terms of who deserves to start. And if RIYA keeps on making these kinds of mistakes and Arteta doesn't move to Ramsdale, then it starts to look more like favoritism than ruthlessness. So we'll see if RIYA improves. We'll see if Arteta decides to make the change. I know you can't just keep chopping and changing your goalkeepers throughout the season, but if your starter's not performing, there have to be consequences. And loser number 3 is Arsenal's attack. And I do want to caveat this a little bit on the day. Right? Again, we were playing at Newcastle. We were at the team with the 3rd best defense in the Premier League. Now, that's not nothing, right? These Newcastle are famously very combative, very physical, very dynamic, very athletic, very well coached, very compact. These aren't an easy group of guys to score on. But we had 13 shots and 1 shot on target. We had an XG, I believe, of approximately 0.6 or 0.55, depending on where you're getting the number from. And, I understand that Jesus isn't there, that Odegaard isn't there, that Party isn't there, but I mean, I don't understand. It just feels a lot of the time like our plan is to progress the ball through the wings and then get it to the byline and just cut back. It feels like so many times I'm just watching us cut back across. And there's nothing incisive through the middle. If anything, it feels like, well, whatever we do through the middle really is just giving the ball to Gabriel, Martinelli, or Bukayo Saka and hoping that they can cut in past 2 men and either cross the ball in or take a shot and put it in the back of the net. I understand that teams have kind of sussed us out a little bit and know to defend very conservatively against us now, but just something's not clicking. We are not as threatening going forward as we were last season, and it's concerning, right? And I guess there are 2 ways to win a game. Either you don't concede and you try to manipulate the margins a little bit and just capitalize on that, or you score as many goals as you can and just really focus on scoring more against the opponent than they do against you. Brazil 2002 style, basically. And last season was closer to the latter. This season, I think Arteta has really made a big shift towards the former. And so far it's worked, right? We entered this match in 2nd place, undefeated, and we were, right there with City, and then there was a large gap, and then the other 18 teams of the league. But we were right there with City in terms of how effective we were defensively. We didn't allow anything for Newcastle, really, aside from the goal. We didn't allow anything for City when we played them either. So it just feels like Arteta's focusing a lot on controlling matches, but it just feels like we are trying to win on fine margins all the time. And most of the time that's going to work, but sometimes, again, you are playing one of the best defenses in the league and they are jazzed up because of their home crowd, and the referee blows a horrific red card and they allow a goal that shouldn't have stood for 3 different reasons, and they cease giving you the 50-50 calls as soon as they don't give one of your players a red card because they feel bad, and they do that thing the referees do where, they feel like they've done too many favors, so they stop doing their job for one team. And so, when you have those things going against you, the margins are really stacked against you at that point. And just cutting it back and crossing to, not a particularly tall forward line isn't guaranteed to overcome that. So what I'm saying here is I just don't think our attack has really been formulated to, always ensure that we have a wide margin of error. It always feels like we do not create enough chances so that if the margins on a particular day, or so that if, things aren't going against us, the margins are not fine enough where that will tilt things in the opponent's favor. So I don't know what the solution to that is. I feel like it's probably a more classic 8 at this point in time. I feel like maybe it's just having Jesus and Partey fit on a regular basis, which unfortunately is a big ask. I feel like maybe Smith Rowe, if he could stay fit, would factor into a solution maybe. But yeah, I'm a little concerned about how good our attack is. So we'll see if that improves. I still think, we are one of the best teams in the league, but we just saw City score 6 against Bournemouth pretty easily. And I think free scoring teams with a little bit of defensive stability are typically more successful than teams with a lot of defensive stability that have trouble putting the ball in the back of the net. So we'll see. I think that'll do it in terms of winners and losers. We're no longer undefeated in the league, which kind of sucks. Mikel Arteta's probably going to get fined. Wouldn't be surprised if he got banned from the touchline for 1 or 2 games for making those comments. It is what it is. But we move. We keep going. I think we have a very winnable run of games coming up until I think we have to travel to Anfield. And if anything, Arteta's pretty good at motivating this team into a siege mentality. So I'm confident that we can go on a winning run, and we'll see where we're at in a few weeks' time. But I'll leave it there. Sash and I are going to talk about this on the pod tomorrow, and we will have a lot more rage for you to listen to there. But until then, take care, drink a latte, stay safe, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.